Welcome back. Tuesday, 27th June 2023. You're back for another episode of the Tiger Town podcast, looking a little bit different in the current studio, podcast on the road, as it were. And we've been on hiatus for a couple of weeks. I'm Zac, he's Toby. Toby, how
Toby.
are you, mate?
I don't know how
How
Hobie is, but Toby's doing all right.
is he? I
Yeah,
prefer Hobie, to be honest. Can we get him back on the show?
nah, he's not good for morale. He's not good for morale. He's a
All
little
right.
bit of a Debbie Downer. Wah wah.
Hobster. Bugger.
But yeah, not
How you
bad.
doing? You good?
Nice little week off actually. Obviously we had the bye and just had the Origin as well, so figured may as well just give it a bit of a break and yeah, ended
Hmm.
up
Boys,
crying myself to sleep on Wednesday night. It was great.
boys needed a buy too, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. Are we talking about the
Hmm.
Blues or are we talking about the Tigers?
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. Not a whole lot looking a whole lot rosy in terms of recent results, though, is it?
No. Definitely my rugby league sides of mine have not gone quite well in the last 2 weeks, but that's okay.
Mm.
Things can only look up, isn't that right?
Yeah.
We're ebbing and flowing with the Dragons about who sits on the bottom of the ladder, but for some reason, we seem like the less basket case. We actually don't seem like a basket case anymore, which is really interesting.
It's refreshing.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. It is refreshing to see somebody else take that mantle and cop it left, right, and centre
Oh,
for
I feel
once.
like I feel like there's three teams that are kind of worse off than we are in terms of basket cases. So it's good to see. It's good to see.
Good. All
Yeah.
right. Mate, just the origin, your summary. I think it's all
Yeah.
been said before. It's dead and
Well,
buried now.
just boot Freddie. We said it after the first Origin. Boot Freddie. Guy doesn't know how to catch. Got booted from the Roosters. He's had one of the best squads at his disposal for the better part of 4 or 5 years, and he's only won 3 series. Get off. Get your hand off it.
Hmm.
Maybe even 2 series. I think he's only won 2 series. 2 series. Am I right with that?
Have to check. I think that was his. He's lost three of the last four, and he's had 6 series. I think he's had 3 and 3. I think he won the first two, and then he's
Lost.
lost three of the last four.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
no.
but either way, yeah, it's been a tenure of what would you say, kooky selections and strange approaches and
Oh, mate.
underperformance. Underperformance.
I just think he's just been on the Mary Jane a bit too much and doesn't know how to do anything anymore.
Mm.
But
Yeah, well, be that as it may, him and his offsider, I think, can both go. They've had their chances.
I
You go a long way in this
can't
in
stand his
rugby league
offside.
world to find a more arrogant, biased person in the rugby league space than Greg Alexander.
Can't stand him.
Um, Something about him just rubs me the wrong way, and
Absolutely.
not a fan. Overrated as a player, overrated as a rugby league mind, in my opinion.
Pretty certain he won a Dally M medal. So hard
So
to.
Jared Hayne,
Yeah, but Jared Hayne was amazing in his time. That
he
20
was.
that 2009 season and then the 2014 season. It's very rare you see performances like that.
No,
So,
you're right.
but in saying that,
No, but he stinks.
I wouldn't say Alexander is overrated as a player. I just think he's an absolute douchebag.
Well, I was trying to, capture the entire motif with a little bit of exaggeration, but thanks for pulling me up on it.
That's all right. That's what we're here for.
Exactly. Yeah, we just ebb and flow off each other so well.
Exactly. What about yourself? What did you make of it?
Origin, yeah, it just time's up. It was a case of basically the last couple of years, in some ways, whatever could go wrong for New South Wales has gone wrong. But the difference is with New South Wales, we use them as excuses, and Queensland seemed to rise to the occasion. A couple of years back, Queensland had everyone out with Bennett, as we all know, in 21, and was that last year?
No,
Last year
2020 that was.
was it 2020? Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Worst Queensland side in history, as they say, and they got up and they got the job done. We lose a couple of our gun players, and all things being equal, we lose Latrell. We have Latrell unavailable. We have Cleary unavailable. We have Appia unavailable. And then we lose Tom Travojevic in the first couple of minutes to the game. These these aren't just starting players. They're probably some of, if not the most key players in the squad of New South Wales. We didn't have Latrell or Tommy last year after they tore him to shreds in the year before that. So, yeah, look, those things for some reason, in New South Wales, they tend to become excuses and they lead to losses expectedly. And Queensland just had this happy knack of rising above it. And it's irritating because the jersey means no less to me. South of the border, coming from New South Wales, I can tell you that much right now. Nor that there's a frustration around it, but yeah, you still got to get the job done. And some of his selections and his tactics and his plays and things, just the injuries or no injuries, yeah, he's had his time, and it's time to go in a different direction, I think.
He's not a coach. I'm sorry. He's not a coach. He couldn't do
No,
shit.
I know. I agree, but neither is Mal Meninga. And he coached through the best tenure of all time with their 8 straight for Queensland. So as long as you're a man manager and you've got tacticians around you, you can do a good job. But it's all about the side you put on paper and whatever their approach is. And yeah, he's had his chance, and yeah, good riddance.
Yeah, good. Glad we're both in the same thing. So we'll just stay on this subject for 2 seconds because I'm keen to understand. For those that aren't Blue supporters, probably won't give 2 shits about this part of the podcast, but it's still rugby league talk, so let's go with it. Who is the next Blues coach in waiting?
It's hard to say for mine. For me, I need somebody that matches the passion, because I don't put a heap of credence in rugby league in state of origin level. When you get to that level in necessarily the coaching side of things, I think it is more man managing, and it's about motivating. It's about getting the boys right on the right day. And I look across the full gamut of full spectrum of ex players or coaches available for New South Wales, and I think who bleeds the most, who hurts the most when New South Wales lose. It's Andrew Johns. So I'd be getting Andrew Johns, and I'd be getting him to pack. I'd be getting him to pack the coaching staff with the angriest, most disappointed, cranky Blues, ex-Blues that he possibly can, and basically just bring back that hate level. Because you've got the players. Both states have the players to win. It's something that's going on between the years, and it's something lost in the jersey. And the further away we can get from circle jerks and barefoot walks through the grass, and the more we can get back into the Tommy Rodonigus cattle dog spirit, I think that's where we're at our strengths as a state.
Yep. I'm of the same mind that we need someone who is passionate, bleeds blue, but I think we need to follow somewhat in Queensland's footsteps. And I think it needs to be somebody that's been relevant in the last, been playing in the last decade and who has bled for the jersey. And hates Queensland, but that every Blue supporter has watched him go through that jersey and watched him literally put everything he has on the line. And that's what Billy Slater's done. You think about the age of the kids that are now, or the age of the players that when they were kids, Billy Slater was their icon. The age of the players now in the Blue squad, probably Andrew Johns was nice and retired by the time they really hit their stride. They might have been 5, maybe 7 when he retired. He didn't get to see him in their full flight or anything like that. But you know who they did get to see? Paul Gallen. They got to see him put one on Nate Miles' chin. They got to see him get in the ref's face, got to see him bleed for his state. He didn't win a lot because he was going against probably the greatest team that's ever been assembled on Australian soil. But he bled. He put everything he had on that line. And that he says he talks his mind and he says what he needs to. Like you said, you don't need to be a tactical coach as the head coach. You need to be a man manager. I don't think Billy Slater's a very good tactical coach at all. I think he just knows how to get his players up and get into play for him. He leads.
Yeah, I see all your points on Gallen. Definitely in the passion side of things. In terms of Slater, from everything I've read and seen, he actually is the opposite. We sort of goes against, I guess, what I was saying. A lot of people are talking about his attention to detail is second to none, and he was like that as a player, and it's just carried on into his coaching. He's got a notebook he carries everywhere and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know if I'll agree on that side of things when it comes to Slater, but yeah, and I think we're both singing from the same song sheet when it comes to to the type of person we want in that role, right?
Yeah.
It's not, it's someone who this shit matters to. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Doesn't matter.
And that's
Doesn't matter to Freddie. Doesn't matter to
no,
Alexander. They just care about
yeah,
having their names in the paper.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's where I'd start. But yeah, there's no obvious candidate. That's for sure. So it'll be interesting to see which route they go, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah. So for excuse me, one more, I guess, one more thing on that note before we wrap up and move back into Tigerland would be something along the lines of selections. If there's anybody that you think might have played their last game in a blue jersey, or at the very least, there should be conversations around. Is there anybody that stands out to you this year thus far? Obviously, there's still one game to go, but who are you thinking might need to start to get a tap on the shoulder and have a chat?
Teddy's the first one. I think he's done. I think, he's probably been one of the greatest New South Wales fullbacks that we've had in a very, very long time. But no, it's from what I've seen at the Roosters, from what I've seen, everyone could say it's confidence. He's a great player, he's done this. And you know what he's done? He served us well. And maybe he deserves this one last game for Origin 3 to have his swan song and say goodbye. But in my eyes, he needs to get tapped on the shoulders. He won't. He'll end on his own terms, which in some ways, yes, he's deserved that. But at the other times, he's, as Blue supporters, we just want to win. We don't particularly give a shit about your swan song, your fairy tale, anything like that. If you're not performing and you're not doing what we need you to do, get someone else. It's been 2 games where he
Well,
hasn't
that.
won.
Yeah, and he's been horribly out of form all year, and that was the case with Queensland with Gagai. There was a lot of contention, if you remember, around game one when they didn't select Gagai, considering he's been playing okay football. He's still going well. He's still young enough. And he's the type of person that everybody's always known that rises to the occasion, does the job for Queensland, yet they went in the opposite direction. He didn't get a swan song. He didn't get to go out on his terms, but obviously he, um, was overlooked in that situation. And, maybe it's one of those types of things. Obviously Teddy still has a lot to offer as a player, but he just all year has looked like a spent force. And it wouldn't matter so much if it was simply that he wasn't creating as much, but he was actively killing plays frequently for us, and stifling our attack in a number of ways. He was caught out of position and costing tries. His defence was awful. His positional play was just not what it's been. So, based on that alone, at least in the discussion, yeah, whether or not it's a proper line through him, I don't know yet, but certainly on his form, there needs to be other people clearly spoken about in that conversation. And to that point, that was obviously the name I was going to say too. I mean, it's staring us clear in the face, but who do you think they're heading into next year? What names? Because there's probably one or two, maybe at least um, push him a little bit, or at least are in the discussion around a possible replacement. I know it's a long way away. This is a brief discussion, but
I think there needs to be. I think it's a dead rubber this year, and I think that there needs to be the discussion of blooding the next generation, because what have we got to lose? Literally nothing. They can have a clean sweep, but who gives a shit? So my instinct is to go with somebody that can be the next, 10 series player, who's around the 21, 22 mark, that's actually starting to hit his strides, or who has a tremendous amount of promise at fullback at the moment. No one really, unfortunately, is coming to mind, which is really concerning for me. Reece Walsh is only 21, so he's going to be there for at least the next 10 years, and he's, just like, it's hard to go against what he can do. He can defend well. He puts his body on the line. He attacks well. Cocky little bastard, but he hasn't earned it yet. But you definitely feel like he might sooner rather than later. But I can't think of anyone that could usurp him from the younger generation. The only one that comes to mind is potentially Dylan Edwards, which is interesting to say that, because you think about 4 or 5 years ago, Dylan Edwards was in reserve grade, or maybe 6 years ago, he was in reserve grade, couldn't even make the first grade squad. Now
he's dropping every ball that was kicked at him. Yeah. I actually thought he was going to be a name we didn't hear much of. Good prediction from my end. Clive Churchill medalist, dual premiership player.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually think that the two names that need to come into the discussion, and they need to come into the discussion next year, would present three names, with Teddy included, that are all three different types of fullbacks. So I think in some ways it would provide opportunities for the entire side to look at going in a very particular and possibly different direction. The three names would be Teddy, Edwards, and the other one is Latrell. If Latrell's fit and firing, he's an option at fullback. But then that is going to dictate, all three of those players are very different players. So um, I think all three of them can do a job. Obviously, Edwards these days, he's Mr. Safe, Mr. Reliable at the back, and Mr. Support play. Latrell is big moments, big plays, which he does in the centres as well. And then obviously Teddy is just what he's done over the years. So, but obviously on that downward slide, I think those are worth a discussion. There's probably a few others in there as well, and maybe a few younger blokes that'll start to poke their head through. But yeah, I don't know. I think that following game three, I'll be pretty happy to sort of wrap up the Origin talk for a year and put it to bed, and we can revisit it next year. I think maybe. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think Origin 3 will probably just be a very quick recap in our pod. I think it's just going to be it's just going to be this is what's happened. Let's wrap it up. Let's get it done and let's move on.
Yeah.
But there's just I don't know. There's a name that comes to mind because he's still only 24 and he's starting to hit some form. He's actually Scotty Drinkwater. I think he could definitely be somebody that if we start to put him in there now, he might actually be. I didn't even know he was. I thought he was a Queenslander, to be honest. I thought he came through the Sunshine Coast system, everything like that. But no, he came through, I think, the Newcastle system and then went down to Melbourne. He's a Penrith boy. Didn't know that. But he's only 24, 25. So he's still got a good another 5, 6, 7 years in him. And that's someone who it can definitely create plays. Like we've said it on the pod before we flogged them last time. He was our danger man. So Scotty Drinkwater is definitely an option for me. But like I said, if I wanted to, if in a perfect world, I'd have a look at somebody that was still a bit younger even for that, but is starting to hit their stride that we can just start to blood and really, I guess, get them to put their hand up and say, I'm taking this spot. See you later, Teddy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll put it on ice for 8 or 9 months, and we'll see where we're at. Maybe March, April next year, right?
Yeah, let's hope so.
Hey, mate. Not short of other big news in the rugby league world the last couple of weeks, and particularly in our space in the last couple of days. So, for those who have been living under a rock on the surface of Uranus for the last however long, there's no surface of Uranus. It's a gas giant. That doesn't make much sense, does it?
I don't know. I'll let you go with that.
Anyway, rambling again. Wouldn't be this podcast without rambling. Luke Brooks, 4 years, Manly. Um, estimated 2.4, 2.5, so around the 650 odd mark.
Yeah,
I think is the estimate.
I think someone also put up about a dollar value of 700 exact. So
yeah, somewhere in that realm.
Yeah.
Also, Tommy Talau confirmed 2 years, which was pretty well known in those circles. Possible immediate switch, though it hasn't happened as of yet. Mate, what do you make about that? What's your take on Luke Brooks, a whipping boy for the last 11 years at our club? He's finally moving on. He's going over to the Northern Beaches. How do you feel?
Well, I've been pretty vocal on this pod that it's been time to part ways. He's shown some promise over the last couple of weeks or last couple of months, probably. Starting to hit a bit of form again, but I still think it's the best move for both parties. I actually think he's going to absolutely shine at the Sea Eagles because we know what he's like when he doesn't have to direct a team. When he won halfback of the year, he was a 5'8". He was 5'8" to Benji's halfback. He just had the number 7 on his jersey. And at the moment, DC is probably the second best halfback in the game at the moment, if not the best. because obviously Cleary's out. But having him there, I think that you're going to see probably the best of Luke Brooks, which is unfortunate. It's sad, but we just haven't been able to sign a quality half next to him. And, you know, everyone's like, oh, now it's Luke Brooks' time to take control of this team. He'll lead this team, but that's not his game. I've said it, you've said it. He's not a halfback. He's a 5'8". He just chimes in when he needs to, takes the line on when he needs to, and sets up when he needs to. Doesn't need to direct the team, and you know the DC does that quite well. 4 years, I think, is pretty bold on their part, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's a good swindle by Isaac Moses, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, it could be a stroke of genius, absolute stroke of genius. It could be like, well, this is, the partnership for the next 4 years, because I think what DCE is on until the end of 2025. I think that's when he's signed till, which will take him to 34, I think, 34.
Excuse me. He's 34 now.
He's 34 now, is he? So take him
Yeah.
to 36.
Yeah.
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 That's still.
But he's not playing like a 34-year-old. He's playing a half. As much as he ran down Crichton in the Origin, he hasn't really lost a step or anything at this stage. He's playing probably career best form. So he actually, Cherry Evans, as much as he is the bane of our existence at times, his longevity in the game and in his position is something to be admired, I guess.
Yeah, look, like I said, I think it's best for both parties. Now we can effectively put this to bed and we can move on. And he doesn't come into the conversation anymore of whose fault it is. And, I'll put my hand up and said I've been one to blame him pretty consistently, especially last year. I think last year was pretty consistent in blaming him, mainly because there was just no structure. There was no threat, and that's where he needs to be. And then probably at the start of this year, I was a little bit more, I was still vocal, because all the stats were pointing to we should be winning a lot of games, but we just weren't scoring because the opportunities weren't being created. We were getting into the opposition 20 zone so easily because we have such a good forward pack, but no one was finishing it off. And whether that's, Brooks's fault or whoever was at fullback at the time, whether it was Laurie, Staines, whoever, it was still really frustrating to watch. But then, we got Buller back and we got Buller in, and it seemed to be Wakeham and Brooks had a pretty good partnership starting to develop. But at the same time, for me, it was too little too late. If he had have signed the reported deal we offered him of 2 years for $500,000 a year, I'd say that's a good deal. I'd say he definitely hasn't earned longer than 2 years, which is, again, like you said, a pretty good swindle from Moses. So I don't think halves, yes, are hard to come by at the moment, but at the same time, that's $700,000 for a half that's consistently underperformed. So, yeah. Wish him all the best. Wish him all the best. Want him to do well.
Yeah.
Like I've reiterated every time I bag Brooks, it's got nothing to do with him as a person. Met the guy a couple of times. Really lovely bloke. He's 8 years younger than us, though. He's a kid to me, kind of. But look, it's it was just time.
I'm a sucker for nostalgia. I'm a bit sad in many ways, but like we spoke about earlier in the week, I think I said my heart is disappointed, but my head is happy because we know what we get with him, and I'm a sucker for a local junior, and he's carried the hopes and dreams of the club in a lot of ways I was about to say the better part of a decade, for literally a decade, and then obviously become the perennial whipping boy from an underperforming club and an underperforming player a lot of that time too. And it's hard. It's hard in some ways to see him go, but like we said, I hope he goes over there and kills it, just not when he plays us. And I think that he will go well. I think at the very least he gets an opportunity to see what he can do in a different system, in a different setup with different players around him and that sort of stuff as well. And at least he'll get an opportunity to see what he can do in that other environment. So I guess in that way, it's going to be a decent little test. But the bottom line is now, with that confirmed, that we now currently have one half on the books for next year, and that's Adam Dewey, who is out with his third ACL and may not even possibly play next year, is the word. If he does, it'll be late in the season he comes back because of the nature of how long this process is on the third one. So we're in the same predicament in some ways, worse off, I guess, with the confirmation of Brooks, that we spoke about a couple of weeks back in the hard situation. Now, this week we've got Brandon Wakeham and Dane Laurie in the halves, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little later in the show when we go through this week's lineup against the Cowboys. But a little bit of talk, or a lot of talk, I should say, about Latu Fainu from the Manly Sea Eagles, which is their, what would you describe in their boom up and coming 5'8", being referred to as the best 18-year-old in the country, of which Talon Silver is probably second best. And big talk, he's a big Fulton man, and their family, all of them. So Manasi, who was the one who got in trouble a little while ago and is serving some time now. We've got Sione at our club, who was signed mid last year and is playing New South Wales Cup at the moment as a prop. And they've got Samuela as well, who's a sort of a younger Olokuwatu clone, who's played a couple of games, played against us earlier in the year. And there's obviously Latu as well, who's yet to debut, but he's the best of them. And he is a sensation, this kid. Now, one thing to consider is that there's no confirmation, and West Tigers have a habit of these things possibly going up in smoke at times. But if we can get him across, I think there's a high likelihood that he possibly even plays a little bit of first grade this year. So he would be a half that is going to be heavily involved here and into the future. With the likes of Iverson Matai in Flegg at the moment. There's Mitchell Chester, another one out of Penrith who's playing Flegg. But these are guys who are young kids. They're not ready. If they will be at all, we all know the percentage and the hit rates of young juniors playing, particularly halves. Their likelihood of seeing NRL at all, if not a long, successful career in NRL. So, mate, the halves conundrum, where are you at with it?
I have no idea. Obviously we've got to put some stock into it, considering we have one half signed for next year. I think there's probably a high likelihood they'll just throw Wakeham a lifeline. I think that if we can get Fainu, apparently both brothers, Latu and I can't remember what the other bloke's called, but Latu and the second rower brother,
Samuela.
There we go. It was Sam something, but I couldn't remember. There's a chance of them both coming over, which will be interesting because then we'd have all three brothers. But the other one, who's bunkmates with Jared Hayne. But we've still got to freshen up. We've still got to stock up that half sort of that we don't really have at the moment. There's talks of reaching back out to Jock Madden, see if he wants to come back. There's talks of old mate who's backing up the Panthers for life. I can't remember his name. Jack Cogger,
son of Trevor Cogger, who was a West Magpies
did not know
legend.
That. There you go.
In fact, early days, Jack Cogger had the choice to go between Newcastle and the West Tigers, and he chose Newcastle because he actually didn't want to have that pressure of being known as Trevor Cogger's son, which is not dissimilar to the path, I guess, Bishop Pearce took with Wayne Pearce.
Yeah. Always wondered why that, and I remember vividly it was back in the day when you could text questions to players when they're on NRL 360, and Mitchell Pearce was on there, and I text that, and he answered and said, yeah, just didn't want the pressure of being a Pearce in Balmain. So, but yeah, regardless of what happens with Latu coming over or anything like that, we still need to start stocking that up because,
Look, even if he does, he's a kid, he's an 18-year-old kid. So best case scenario would be that we play him next year. That's absolute best case scenario. Like I guess a Carl Oluwapu at the Bulldogs, and in
Nathan
that
Cleary,
situation,
Nathan Cleary debuted at 19.
yeah, that's 19. So
But
you know if he's 18,
if it's next year, it's 19.
or he'll obviously turn 19 at some point next year. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point I'm saying is, if he's starting the year in that position as like the starting 5'8" or the first choice 5'8", it's fundamental that we need a solid 7 around, and
Yeah.
we're flat out getting a 7, much less a solid experience 7.
Yeah. And there's not many on the ticket. There's not many that are running around anymore. They all seem to be up and comers and juniors or makeshift halves. You know, I think they're just like they need to look at other options, and I think possibly going back to Super League, maybe bringing Caesar back over. You know, we had that crack at George Williams, but he re-signed with Warrington for another 3 years. You know, maybe reach out to Pierce one more time, see if he's keen. But yeah, there's just nothing really in the NRL standard that's in terms of an experienced half. And in saying that, everyone's like, why didn't we keep Brooks? Why don't we do that? It would have been the exact same thing as we've seen because essentially Brooks needs a halfback. Brooks not a halfback. We couldn't have brought Fainu over and then kept Brooks at number 7 and thinking Brooks is the experienced halfback that's going to develop this kid. No, that's not what's going to happen because Brooks can't steer a team around properly. So we still need somebody who is an out and out halfback. You know, there was talks of Cowboys potentially shopping around Chad Townsend. He'd be an option. You know, obviously we reached out to Johnson, but he doesn't want to leave New Zealand again. He's happy being over there with his family, which is fair. But yeah, like apart from that, there's no one really. Like the only other one that I can kind of think of, and the fact that he's stuck for another 4 years behind the incumbent is maybe Pezzett. But even then, he's still a bit of a rookie.
And he only re-signed just last year, I think, as well. So he'd need to be given permission to do that. And then you'd have a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old running your side, and you just don't do it. I mean, that was Brooks and Moses, you know, nearly 10 years ago now, and it just didn't work at the time. You need an experienced head in there. And as you said, you rattled off the list, and there's just nothing. And if you recall, I remember saying this early in the year when we were chasing Moses. I said, if we don't get him, we're in trouble. And it's not the fact that we were to miss him necessarily. It's the fact that after he's signed on Moses, there is no one. There is no one that's top shelf, and even below top shelf, there's no one who's even moderately good and experienced available. It just cannot happen.
No.
There's no one around, and so we're talking about the likes of Jack Cogger or Mitchell Pearce at 35, who's in France, or you know whoever else might be possible as we said, as possibilities. So yeah, these things, yeah, I don't know, and I think the club's in that sort of situation as well. They need to figure it out, and they need to figure it out quickly. And Latu Fainu, if he comes, he's not going to be changing a whole lot for a few years, and we run the risk of stifling his development in some ways, like we did with Brooks with the same mistake. You know, we've spoken a lot about how you can't, in some ways, help when you got your money. You can't help what is available in the market. So halfback looks like a stopgap again for a little while.
Look, there's a name that keeps popping up, and he's never been a world breaker. But for me,
World
he's
beater.
whatever. For me, he's you know he's a Chad Townsend kind of player. He just does what he needs to. He's not doesn't set the world on fire. And that's actually Drew Hutchinson. He's 28 years old. He's got roughly 105 games, first grade games to his name. He's playing.
How many of those are in the halves? I know he originally was a half, but he's very rapidly made himself into a utility nowadays, hasn't
He has. He was. I think majority of his time at the Roosters has been a utility.
he? Mm.
I know it was a half at St George and he was half over in the UK, but I think he's been mostly utility at the Roosters. Um, but in saying that too, he was playing half New South Wales Cup for the better part of 2 of those years. He really hasn't started to consistently show in the Roosters side until like the last 18 months. And that's when his utility factor came into play. So before that, he was a half.
Mm.
It's not a bad option if I'm being honest. I feel like um, if we're looking at somebody that has just a bit of a cool head on their shoulders, a bit more experience, he's not a young guy, been overseas, he's done this, he's done that. It's not a bad option, and he's off contract this year, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't say no if I'm being brutally honest because there's not much else out there.
I think they're going to have to really get on the blower and pry somebody away from a club that's next in line. I'm thinking someone like a Braden Trindle or a Sam Walker who's out of favour. They
Well,
need someone like that.
I read somewhere that Braden Trindle was starting to look at offers from Super League, so obviously he'd want to stay in the NRL.
Yeah,
Um,
well, there was a lot of talk that he was heir apparent to Moylan's contract and that Moylan won't be offered a new one at the end of next year, maybe. But if he's, given a walk-up start and 750K 3-year contract with a mutual option fourth to be the starting halfback for an NRL side, you know, and then you start rattling off everything else that the Tigers have to offer, you listen. You most definitely listen in that situation if you're Braden Trindle. And everything I've seen, everything I've heard, he's definitely quality.
yeah, and that's not surprising. I mean, everything we've seen, every time he's had to put on a Sharks jersey, he's playing like he deserves to have it. He's just been stuck behind two halves that have been playing very, very good football. But look, I think it's going to be a conversation that is ongoing until it's sorted. It's never going to die because and obviously we're not the only ones in this sort of in this, I guess, conundrum or whatever I'm trying to say, because there's a couple of teams out there that are pretty desperate for a quality halfback or a quality half. Um, thinking of probably, the Dolphins are a big one. Sean O'Sullivan's okay, but again, he's not a world beater. Um, you've got, just trying to think of Knights. You got Jackson Hastings, but even he's hasn't really performed this year either. So halves are a rare commodity at the moment.
Mm. And no doubt they'd have the finger on the pulse with all the New South Wales Cup sides and Queensland Cup for that matter. I'm not around the reserves unfortunately as much, and so I don't really know. I guess across those two leagues, what's going on. But surely, yeah, some of those names you mentioned, and across in Super League too. You got the likes of Jake Clifford who ended up bombing out big time over here. Over there, you've got people spoke about Lewis Dodd from St Helens. There's a few other names that floated around that are over there, either ex NRL players or Englishmen themselves. There is players out there, but it's a matter of accumulating. If you get Latu Fainu as a young up and comer, and he's the heir apparent, and maybe even nabs the first choice spot, then you need to have a selection of 3 or 4, possibly other halfbacks specifically that you can slide in and see who works and see who starts to own that team. Um, you know, is Wakeham one of them out of pure necessity? Do you re-sign Brandon Wakeham because we have to? I think at this stage you probably do, and you probably do it tomorrow because you at least need to have someone there. I know he's not going to be chased down by everybody, but at the moment he's the first choice starting halfback for the Tigers.
No, no.
And he can play first grade, and he can do a job, and he was the 5'8" when we beat Cowboys 66-18. He was in the halves when we beat the Panthers. He was in the halves when we beat the Dragons. So he can play in the halves in successful football teams. Obviously he's really come back with his form in the last few weeks, and his shortcomings, I guess, have really had a spotlight on them. But I think we're at the stage where we sort of have to look at locking him down first and then going, right, we need two others. And then hopefully we can jag Fainu and go from there. Because I've got no doubt in the future that as this next wave comes through in the next 3-4 years, options are going to open up galore. In 2-3 years, the market is going to be a lot more available again as the cycle begins. We can't just sit on our hands for 2-3 years with no one. We've stacked this side with what we've got at the moment. And as much as we might not see the success with this forward pack that we've currently got, it can be the type of forward pack that can lead us then into a transition period with our forwards coming through. But in the meantime, we need to be competitive, or we'll just keep spinning our same wheels all over. And yeah, these top quality blokes aren't going to continue to power a ship that has no steering wheel for 3 years straight.
No.
I think they're flat out doing it for 6 months.
No. And the thing that worries me a little bit too is, if they get desperate and they move Appy to halfback, that will worry me. I really hope it doesn't come to that. But they've made stupid decisions like putting, our informed centre at, 5'8".
Yeah, I think the main reason they did that, and I still don't agree with it, I still think it was silly, but the main reason was that Laurie was earmarked to be 5'8", but he was concussed. I had concussion protocol, so he couldn't play.
Okay.
So that was the reason why they put Star in there. But at least, Laurie will be in there this week and we'll get a chance to see that. Dane Laurie next year. Do you stick him around now and just have him train only as a 5'8"? Again, you sort of have to, I guess.
You're going to have to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Offer him a 2-year contract and just ensure, like, we've seen that Will Smith doesn't really offer much. He's not offering much in New South Wales Cup. But we know the quality of player that Laurie is, and the biggest fault we had, and we said it consistently, was his support play. That was his biggest fault. Not as important in a half position. He can tackle. We know that. He can pass. Passing was becoming better. But as that last effort, not really. Like maybe he's a little bit better of not being that linchpin or not being that final pass, being that linchpin. Passing it to Buller, who has that amazing flick on him or can cut out through that cutout pass. But look, I think you have to. I think the current halves that we have right now who are playing to Saturday, I think you've got to lock them down for a minimum of another year.
So. Yeah, that's a reserve grade halves pairing. Yep. Wakeham and Laurie could be playing halves for Magpies, and I'm pretty certain they did earlier in the year.
Yeah, yep, probably back when it was Dewey and Brooks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's not forget though as well, and this is something that can't be understated how important it is. We're missing 3, if not 4, of our first choice spine in some ways. Now, at the start of the year, Buller wasn't necessarily. Excuse me. He was on the scene, but he wasn't first choice. Dewey out for 18 months. Appy's now out. Brooks is now out. Point me to another side, and we've got Buller, who's an 8-game rookie or a 6-game rookie in fullback. Point me to a side that can lose 3/4 of their first choice spine and be competitive at all. What expectations should we really be having with Appy, Brooks, and Dewey out? The fact that we lost Dewey at the start of the year as the first choice 5'8", that's something that, it happens. And he wasn't playing the house down, but he was still first choice 5'8". Now, this is something that doesn't get spoken about enough, I don't think.
No, and it's true. And it's 100% true. But like you mentioned previously, before Appy got, elbowed in the jaw and nothing happened to that mullet wearing douche, we just seemed, our head just didn't seem like there was in the game to begin with. Now, I thought it was, obviously went a lot downhill after he got injured, but, maybe something, just, I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for? The consistency wasn't there again in that game to start with. So, yes, we have lost that, but the signs were already not fantastic prior to those those three, or at least those two, fallen to injury 2 weeks ago. So 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But it is what it is. So I'd say let's, I guess, wrap up the halves discussion because we're not getting anywhere tonight, and maybe have a look ahead to the weekend and see how we go from there, eh?
Yeah, why not? So we've got Cowboys on again. So got them on Saturday at 5:30, I believe.
Yeah, 5:30 Saturday up at in North Queensland in Townsville.
And you know they'll be looking for revenge. I'm a little bit worried about this game. You know they're going to try to turn it on because that was humiliating for them. Amazing for us, humiliating for them. And the performances they've been putting in the last few weeks shows that potentially they're starting to hit their straps. Drinkwater's on fire. Townsend's just doing what he needs to be. And Dearden, God, I thought he had, second year Cowboy syndrome at the start of the year. I thought he was a shadow of how he was in 2022. But yeah, he's the last few weeks he has just been on fire. So, but yeah, look, we know what happened last time we played them. And funnily enough, you and I were both in Stanthorpe last time we played them. And then we're going to be near Stanthorpe again this weekend. So who knows? Maybe if they like we mentioned previously, if we win this week and we win convincingly, we might have to buy some property out at Stanthorpe for the betterment
Might
of
be the It might be the secret sauce for when we play the Cowboys. Let's go through the lineup really quickly. So fullback Jerry Buller, on the wings are Nofaluma and Tupou. Naden and Toa are in the centres. Dane Laurie at 5'8". First start there for the club is my understanding. Brandon Wakeham is halfback at 7. Toikamanu returns from Origin at 8. Clemmer is the other prop at 10. We've got Simpkin in the hooking role, filling in for Appy still. Papali'i, Sean Bloor are the back rowers on the edge, and John Bateman locks the scrum. Talon De Silva, young Talon, is the number 14 after making his debut in his last game against Melbourne. Fanua Pole and Alex Twal are the bench props, and Asuka Poe are the bench utility. Reserve list, Seafarth, Smith, Talau, Matamua, and Atasi James. What do you like about the squad that's been picked? Any changes that stand out?
No, I think it's the best squad we can put on paper at the moment.
Yeah.
I think that.
What
do you say?
I was going to say we're hurting in injuries, I think.
Yeah.
To your point, it might not seem it to the outside observer or a non-Tigers fan, but yeah, look, like we said, we're missing a lot of key players, key spine players, and so we're trying to just field a side in many ways. There's some parts of our side that have been reasonably unaffected, and we're really lucky in that sense. The forward pack's been relatively unchanged, obviously outside of Appy for most of the year, so we've been lucky in that sense. But the halves obviously have been decimated. The back line's been chopping and changing all over the shop. And as a result, obviously the interchange bench is going to be affected by that too. So we're doing our best in that regard. For me, it's good to see Stafford back in the centres where he belongs.
Definitely. Look, it was an experiment that, they tried. And after the game, I believe I said that experiment has clearly failed. So good to see that they haven't decided to, we'll just stick to our guns. He'll find his feet. There was no finding his feet there. Like, he is not a 5'8". He is a very good centre at the moment. Keep him in a position that he's performing very well in. So,
yeah. Dane Laurie in the 6. What do you like about that selection in there?
I don't know yet. Haven't seen him play at 6.
So you're relatively familiar with his game, though. So what do you like about his game? What do you think he can bring to the 6 role, I guess?
Excuse me. Sorry. I think that his speed is definitely something that he'll bring to that 6. I think that he'll find it. I think you'll find him get on the outside of his man a lot more than, say, a Brooks or a Toa could. I think that's something that they'll most likely be working towards, is getting him on the outside of his inside man, and then creating that 3-on-2. I think, you listen to all the stuff that Gus has said, and Gus has come out and said, I never saw him as a fullback. I always thought he was going to be a 5'8". He only played at fullback for the Panthers because that was the only spot available. And it was the spot we needed him in. So, look, you and I have both said we really like Laurie. He hasn't been what he's needed to be this year, but maybe that's because we've needed him to be something that he's not. So this is his chance to
Then that sounds familiar. Sounds very West Tigers when we were talking about Brooks, didn't it?
a little bit. But that's the thing, like, you know, you think about the changes, like I'm looking at what Benji's doing, and I like the Toa move was a pure Sheen's move, but I think it was also because of a necessity. Now that you've said that, Laurie had a concussion, and it was kind of the next best option. But it reeked of Sheen's. But watching how the team is selected, it reeks of a hand of Benji. And the reason I say that is because we're not beating a dead horse and hoping it wakes up. It's that we're doing things that make sense to us. Like I can't think of how many times you and I have discussed selections and had absolutely no idea why. Like we're not in the nitty gritty. We don't know what's going on, but any like armchair footballer could see that some of selections were just stupid. These don't seem stupid. These seems like somebody that has played football in the last 5-6 years that knows how the current game is going. So look, I really, really hope, like, I don't expect him to be the X factor, the game changer, everything we need someone to be right now. But I'd love to see him have a solid impact on the game and to say, look, I have shown you this is my spot. And so, and who knows, he might even sit there and, be the number 7 that we needed. He might be a game manager. Who knows? So what about yourself?
Yeah, I just think that he brings a bit of excitement, a bit of elusiveness with him. I think he's got the skill set to play there. I don't know what his kicking game is like. I know he can pass the football, and obviously he's got a good running game. So I'm keen to see that. I hope he can kick. If he can kick, it's going to take a bit of the pressure off Wakeham. I think we saw last game with Toa that last game was Gold Coast. Is that right? It's been a long break with the bye.
Yeah, it has been actually.
Was last game Gold Coast? Last game was Melbourne
Melbourne.
with
Yep.
Melbourne because of Talon. Yeah. Well, we saw with Toa that he didn't have much of a kicking game, and that put a lot of pressure on Wakeham, and he's a pretty easy target then to put pressure on for the opposition defences. I just want to see a point of difference. I want Laurie to bring something that we're like, oh wow, that was impressive. I don't know what that is, whether it's different plays, whether it's different setups, whether it's early kicks, whether it's a bit of urgency. Bring a bit of that attitude that we saw against Parramatta last year, where he raced down and whacked Gutherson.
Yep.
That sort of stuff is stuff that's been missing. If we're going, I sound like a broken record in some ways, because if we're going to be a side that's missing key plays, if we're going to be a side that's looking to next year already, at least compete on every play. If you're missing your key guys, if you're going to struggle to score points at the best of times, it's got to be attitude. You've got to compete on every kick. Line speed's got to be on point. You've got to be whacking people. You got to be doing all those little things that are not just talent only based. And hopefully Laurie can bring a bit of that and bring a bit of aggro with him. And he's a competitor, no doubt. And I hope that he brings a little bit of a point of difference, particularly in attack. And other than that, just make your tackles, son.
Yeah. And, I'm not concerned about the tackles, him making his tackles, to be honest. Like, haven't seen him defend in the line a lot, but we know he puts his body on the line for a guy that's tiny as well, compared to some other fullbacks. He's probably taller than me. But compared to some other fullbacks or some other halves, he's not the biggest. But he doesn't shirk his responsibility. He tries. You think about that perfect example of him just taking it to Gutho, and just getting in his face. That's that energy, and that's the thing I think we'll see on the weekend. I think you'll see energy from him. I think that he'll come out with a point to prove, because no one's looked for him he hasn't signed anywhere, so he needs a contract. and he knows that this is probably his best option now that Brooks is gone. So he's going to want to put on a performance, and I think he will.
Yeah, yeah, and we've been critical of him in the past at certain times, but we want him to be good and have success for our club. So I'm hoping to see that. Excuse me, keen to see a little bit more of Silver, obviously, as well. He's going to be a very slow burn. He's a young fella, and he plays in the middle. High work rate, high work rate. Lots of big boys running at him, so that's going to take time with him. But great to see him getting some time. Other than that, there's no real surprises. I thought Papali'i and Blore both had some of their probably season best games. Last game against Melbourne, a couple of line breaks each, and performed quite well. So very happy to see that. And yeah, Taylor's back up against his son Valentine Holmes this weekend, so hopefully he can take it to school again and yeah, do a bit of damage out on that edge. I think Naden's due for a big game, to be honest too. I think he owes us a bit. I think ill discipline and missing a whole bunch of matches, and he's very very quiet in his return game. So I think he's due for a big one coming up against Peter Hicker.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think so. And there's something too that a little bit off, kind of off topic, but still a little bit on topic. We haven't mentioned is one of my predictions finally came true. Twoley crossed for the big meat pie.
He certainly did. Now I have a bit of a suspicion, and I'll have to go and replay that episode.
That we knocked it
That
on.
no, not that he knocked it on, but the episode prior was actually the first episode that you had not mentioned it.
It really?
Yeah,
Still
I have a
counts. I've
sneaking
mentioned it every
suspicion.
other episode.
No. Your bold prediction for this game, mate. I have a sneaking suspicion, and I'll confirm for next week's show that the week he scored was actually, I think, the week that you did not mention it. I'm happy to be wrong, but if it is, we'll play it back live next week.
I'm definitely having to re-listen to that because there's no chance I did. No chance.
Oh, there's a chance. Oh, there's a big chance.
No,
But
not a chance.
speaking of bold predictions, the monkeys off the back in regards to 12, wasn't it a great moment?
Oh, it was great. I got chills. I got
Yeah.
chills. Just watching all the boys get around him, Clemmer. I don't think Clemmer could get the smile off his face for a good 5 minutes after
Yeah.
that.
And that was it for me. It was the response that they saw when not only we'd scored, but they realised who it was, and their
Yeah.
faces double lit up, and it was just a raw happiness moment at a time when the club's hasn't had a heap of success obviously recently, and it was just one of those. It was a non-results based piece of joy in the game, and it was just a great example of why I love this game.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah,
And the
and
rest of the game was
I think NRL fans across the league were stoked.
yeah.
Everyone was talking about it. It was such a big thing. So yeah, it was cool. It was really cool.
I think it was try of the week with NRL.com.
Hey,
It
had to
really
be.
wasn't that fascinating, but because it was 12, it was try of the week.
Yeah, I think my favourite moment was "My Heart Will Go On" dubbed over the top of it, like the Titanic theme music.
Yeah.
It just everything became more dramatic when you watch that. I think I'm getting chills thinking about it. I'm gonna have to go back and watch it 10 times tonight before I go to sleep. All right,
Sweet.
mate. So on that note, I guess we've finally had a bit of a we have broken the drought. Not we, but your bold prediction have moved on to a new era. So, mate, the Cowboys game 5:30 on Saturday. Got a bold prediction for us?
You know what? I do. My bold prediction, because he tried a couple of times. Nah, De Silva will get over from dummy half because he tried a couple of times. I reckon he'll get over from dummy half.
Nice. Noted try scorer. I've mentioned in the pod a couple of times.
Yep.
Scored on debut in Flegg. Scored in his second game in New South Wales Cup. And yeah, I think he was like the top try scorer in the SG ball side or something like that too. So yeah, noted try scorer. Nice. I love to see that with the kid.
What about you?
I got Dane Laurie 2 try assists.
Oh, I like that one too. I like that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Cut out ball and something else. I don't know. Maybe a kick.
Yeah. Look, like I said, I'd love to see him just have something of an impact. He doesn't have to be the game changer, the game breaker, the X factor all the time. But to have an impact would be really pleasing for me.
He's a footballer. I've said this before. You want him in your squad, in my opinion. Now, whether he's in the 17 every week, I don't know. But he's the type of footballer I think that you want in your squad.
Yeah.
Particularly if he makes a decent fist of playing in the halves as well as a backup fullback or whatnot. If you got to call on Dane Laurie as a backup fullback, I'm pretty rapt to be perfectly honest. I'd be re-signing him on a smaller deal, but just to keep him in the 30 because I think he's important.
Yeah, I agree too. Yeah.
Scoreline, mate. How's the game going to go? Concerned?
I am concerned.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm going to say we're going to win, but we're not going to flog them like we did last time. I'm going to say it's going to be 22-14.
Okay.
So that's 2 penalty goals to Wakeham as well.
Okay. So 3 tries apiece. Failed to miss 2.
Yep.
All right. Interesting.
What
Nice.
about you?
Like it. I'll take it. Other way.
Yeah, I figured as much.
38-6. They're going to give us a touch up. Look, we're missing Api Coruscant. Our starting halfback's gone. Yeah, we're struggling. We're in a rough spot. We're missing key players and key positions, and they've caught form, and we're doing our best. So I think it's a tall order to see him at this time. And geez, what a turnaround from 66-18. But we caught fire that night, and we've since been hammered by injuries and form, and they've since caught fire themselves. So that's how close this comp is. It can swing like that. It can happen. Hasn't happened yet. It's on Saturday night, but yeah, I'm fully expecting that to happen. I hope we're competitive. I hope we're in it, and I hope that we win. I hope you're right. We'll have to wait and see. Fingers crossed.
At the same time, I do really want to win, but I also don't want to have to buy land out at Stanthorpe. So maybe don't win.
Could be worse. Stanthorpe's good.
It is nice.
Lovely spot.
I just don't have the money.
Yeah, good point. We might have to pass the hat around.
Yeah, might just get all the boys involved and just buy it together.
Yeah, we'll see how we go. Mate, on that note, we might wrap up the show. Good to be back. I'm obviously on tour at the moment, but we'll be back in the studio as of next week and everything as per normal as we march towards the back end of the season. Pleasure as always, my friend. 5:30 we'll be watching it. We do a public service announcement every single week. You guys know the drill by now. Hop on YouTube, hop on the Facebook page, Tiger Town Podcast, YouTube channel by the same name. Hop on to the 2 podcasts that do them better than us, the West Life Podcast and the West Tigers Podcast. Get over onto their respective platforms. Tell them who sent you. The humble boys from the Tiger Town Podcast. And, mate, we'll do it all again next Tuesday, or next Wednesday, I should say, because that's when we release it. Other than that, mate, all the best for our boys on Saturday night, and go the Tigers.
Go the Tigers.